welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on the Procurement Pivots podcast. Hello, Laura.
Hey, Donna. Great to see you as always.
You too. You too. So today we're bringing a really important topic to the conversation. We feel one that definitely, I've certainly experienced it coming up more and more over the last few years. So we're going to be talking today about burnout within procurement careers, and particularly in relation to actually spotting the signs early enough, both in yourself but also potentially if you're leading a team, in team members as well. So we thought we would kind of start with some context, didn't we? Just why are we even talking about this? Why is this a topic worthy of mention? So where would you like to start today, Laura?
I think you're spot on with setting the context. And, burnout can exist in any profession, in any shape or size of organisation, and at any stage of your career. I think particularly why it is an issue in procurement is because of the nature of the role. And I think it's important to highlight some of the aspects of the role that can mean that burnout's a particular risk for procurement professionals. So I think that the reason why it is more prevalent, or it's a greater risk of arising, is because of this profession is evolving, and in many cases it's evolving at pace, and it's a profession that you are constantly trying to serve others, and it's such a fulfilling role to serve and to help other people. Like we've worked with so many procurement professionals who love to help others. I think where it can be tricky is that boundaries are crossed, in terms of how above and beyond we go, and that can really pose a problem. And I think as well, given the legacy perceptions we've talked about in procurement as well, that you're constantly trying to show that you're adding value. So all of these things are different pressure points that for me pose a greater risk of creating burnout within this profession.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that point just around this pressure to show what you're doing, because I have to say, I'm not sure that pressure exists as much in other professions. Actually in procurement, the job itself is demanding, challenging, and the job itself is evolving, and there is loads more expectation these days, it feels like, and often there's less support and there's less resource. So I think that creates the pressure. But I think, on top of the day job, actually, something that is relatively unique to procurement is this pressure to constantly have to educate and show, the value, because people still don't really understand it or see it. And it's almost like that also has to happen on top of the day to day. So, yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing more of it. We're seeing more of it globally, not just in procurement, across so many different disciplines. But yeah, I think particularly right now, there's a lot of spotlight on procurement, and like you say, the profession is changing significantly and at pace, but the level of support and resource isn't changing at the same rate, and often it's going down, it's not increasing. So that doesn't add up, does it? It's do all this extra stuff, but you don't also have the extra resource. So I just think, I mean, I think procurement is an amazing profession, but it has its challenges like any. And yeah, I think that's probably, some of why we see this quite regularly actually pop up in procurement.
Yeah, I think you're spot on as well. Like you say, the demands are bigger, there's more plates to spin, things that come in that a procurement professional needs to then get on top of, like, how do we procure technology solutions, AI, how do we do these things that I need to learn more about? And
Mm,
and that puts more pressure on. I think something else that I'd like to say as well, just before we head into what the signs might be, is around that you talked about the pressure. There aren't many other professions that have it in a similar way. And I'm just thinking back to my experiences of working in house when, you had these really passionate procurement teams servicing the NHS. The customer was always at the forefront all the time.
mm,
And the pressure that the forefront of the NHS experience, that then gets transferred and carried as well by the procurement professional who really wants to do a good job and support that
mm,
customer. And so I think as well, procurement have to carry this weight of like taking on other people's stresses. And so because
mm.
they're seen as a supporting function, I think that's another risk, but maybe that's a conversation for another episode. It just came to
Yeah,
me when we were
yeah.
talking. Yeah.
But I think
So,
as well, like we've spoken before about, particularly as you become more senior, like often there's then fewer people around to kind of
yeah.
share your challenges with. Like, words like lonely and isolating do come up in conversations, particularly with procurement leaders, that they might be sat on a leadership team. They're the only person in procurement. Sometimes they're sat on a leadership team and they don't feel like the other people on that leadership team get procurement. The constant need to have to prove and show and, you know, appear strong and calm to your team. Like, you can't talk to your team about it because you don't want to worry them or unsettle them. You can't talk to your peers because they don't even get it, right? They don't get procurement a lot of the time. So just think, like, and I'm laughing, so many people share. It's like, I can't talk to my partner about this because they don't really know what I do either. Like,
Mm.
when they talk to their friends, it's like, they get that funny look, like, how many people still can't even pronounce the word procurement, let alone understand what it means? So I kind of think like, you know, if you're not sharing your worries, your concerns, your frustrations, it means that unless you're processing them really well yourself, you're internalizing it. And actually, when you internalize these things, like often that leads to worry, anxiety, overwhelm. That starts affecting your sleep. The lack of sleep means you're not thinking clearly, you're not making decisions, you're starting to question everything. And it's this like vicious circle and this spiral. So I think that is, that's another point to add. But I think the other thing I wanted to kind of like almost highlight or say is like, I think sometimes like burnout is a phrase that is so widely used now, and burnout looks and feels different for different people. But I think there is this perception that burnout happens when you're working really long hours and you're not taking breaks and you're not being kind to yourself. Yes, it can cause burnout, but that is not the only way. Like some
Mm.
people are burning out not because they're working excessively long hours, but because of the pressure or because of the expectation or because of the fact that they're in the wrong environment for them. They don't feel like they can show up as themselves. Like actually, if you're in a misaligned environment, or if you're in an environment where there is not alignment with your values, if you're constantly having to like almost justify yourself or your way of working, or you feel like you're kind of, almost like just coming up against this resistance constantly, like that is not sustainable in the longer term. And, lots of the people I've spoken to in procurement that have, described themselves as previously or currently experiencing this, it isn't always just that long hours, but it's just being in this wrong environment for too long,
Mm.
it's draining and it's exhausting and it takes its toll. Sometimes then, I mean, it happens over time, but then sometimes it declines really quite quickly.
Yeah, and like I said, I really agree with what you say there. We do often attribute burnout to the long hours
Yeah,
and those sorts of things. But if you are not experiencing that alignment, and we've talked a lot about what do you want in your career,
yeah,
how do you want to show up as a leader? There's the cost of not doing those things is things like burnout because you're not feeling that alignment. And you've mentioned some great things there. So, like the decision fatigue is a huge thing. You've got loads of emails in the inbox, and each one requires a decision.
mm,
And so you get a little bit sort of stuck with there. I think something I've seen as well is that when relationships start to break down in the organization and such, because you have or others have a shorter fuse. And it's because you're trying to, and I remember seeing a video on this about how um I know we call it like the straw that broke the camel's back in English, but there's also this thing about the last drop of water in the glass that
yeah,
overspills the glass, So like you
right,
take on all these stress,
yeah,
these micro stresses all the time, and they're just and you swallow the big things, even the big
mm,
stresses, and then once that cup is full of water, it doesn't matter if it's a tiny little thing,
yeah, yeah,
it's the last drop or the last straw in
yeah,
as we would say it in English that then causes that thing to happen. So that fuse becomes a lot shorter. And I think that's definitely something that I see when people are experiencing burnout is that they notice a breakdown in relationships. So not necessarily huge conflict, but
yeah,
just isolating yourself or feeling
yeah,
isolated, where that can you disconnect from others. That can be a really, really huge sign, I
yeah,
believe. And you
yeah,
mentioned the physical stuff as well is a huge thing.
yeah. I think the like, yeah, the sleep for a lot of people is massive. Like actually, when I first started the business, I did like a round of market research with various people in procurement, and it was around like career happiness in procurement. And I was asking them, when you're at your happiest, when you've been at your happiest, what does that look like and what does that feel like? And one of the recurring things that people said, it was like, I can sleep well. I'm not dreading the Monday morning, like the Sunday night, like that Sunday night thing comes up a lot. But I think, yeah, like, often people do withdraw, don't they, from a lot, like when they're going through all of this, like they're just not behaving or feeling in the way that they have historically. And I think, one of the things, the overthinking that comes from not taking action or not being decisive, it's like definitely something I've seen is that people very quickly, like I see it with people job searching, it's like the questions start coming really quickly. Is it me? Start questioning yourself, your role, the company. Do I even want to be in procurement anymore? And it's all these like questions that
Mm-hmm.
come really, really quickly. So yeah, just like questioning everything. A lot of people say when they're in that mindset, and actually because you're not in a mindset where you can almost make decisions very easily. Like, I mean, I was like that a few years ago myself, and I've kind of shared it before, but yeah, I was lying awake like night after night, struggling to get sleep, like taking me like 5, 6 hours, and all these thoughts and questions whirring in my head. But because I wasn't really sleeping at that point, I just couldn't make a decision. Like, and I'm really decisive. I can make decisions really quickly. Sometimes I don't, but often I do. But I just couldn't, I didn't share it, going back to the point earlier. And because I wasn't sharing it and I wasn't saying it out loud and processing it, it all just kind of stayed up here, like whilst I was lying in bed. And that was like such a difficult time. But I think that's the challenge when you are burnt out. Often you can't make decisions. You don't trust
Mm.
yourself to make the right decision. And if you can't make decisions, you're kind of stuck in this place, aren't you? Like
Mm.
just not moving forward at all.
Yeah, like a vicious cycle, isn't it? Exactly that.
Mm,
It's sometimes it's even like, well, I just need to do this next thing, but you're just so burnt out and tired from having
yeah,
to do lots of other things. It can be so frustrating for want of a better word. So
yeah,
So we've obviously covered the signs there in terms of what you might see individually. So we've talked about decision fatigue, the shorter fuse, the disconnecting from others because you feel isolated. Talked about the physical impact. Another one to add to that actually is not just the sleep, but no longer finding joy in the stuff that normally you do enjoy can be also a thing.
Yeah.
So, and the questioning yourself as well. I think, there's lots of really valid points there. What about if we were to think about how you might notice that in your team members, if you're a leader, or, in your peers even?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think, often the signs are there quite early, like they will start gradually and kind of increasing, I would say. But I think, normally there is a change in behaviour in that individual. So we've spoken about withdrawing, maybe they're not getting as involved in the conversations, maybe they're, suddenly, not participating in meetings. I think like, actually when you're genuinely burnt out, you're more susceptible to getting poorly and getting ill. So I think also, it's like almost like, repeat absence as well can sometimes be a sign that there's more going on behind the scenes. I think even just like you might start noticing changes in performance levels as well. So like, they're still doing the things, but actually maybe they're making mistakes when they didn't used to. Maybe the quality isn't quite the same. It's just not quite as what they're doing isn't quite as sharp, or just feels like they're going through the motions and not really, I think, engaged, like not really engaged. They're doing it, but they're not they're not present with what they're doing maybe as much as they were previously.
Yeah, that's a huge one for me. I think, that isn't there a phrase like called quiet quitting or something
Yeah,
you hear about? It was a big thing at some point, wasn't it? I'm not sure how often it's used now, but certainly you notice that disengagement. And I think as well, when you think about even if you see a change in those who you class as high performers, that's also
yeah,
quite a bit, like you see a sign about where a team are suffering from burnout and such. And another one I think as well is something that's really interesting, and you might even experience it on an individual level, as well as just seeing it in a team, is that rigidity, like the not being open to change because it's too much. It's just too much,
mm,
like, digging our heels in, I think
yeah,
is something that you can sometimes see because sometimes when we're under pressure and stress, we try our hardest to keep control of what
mm.
we can.
Yeah. So maybe like even I think often I think people's like emotional reactions, they might be snapping more than they used to, like just responding quicker, or maybe you're getting a sense that they're just being a bit more defensive maybe as well, so but it's gonna be very, very different for each person. And actually, some of these signs might also be signs that person is just not happy about something, or maybe they've got other stuff going on. It's not necessarily a sign of burnout, but I think actually these are early warning signs that, you
Mhm.
know, probably some kind of conversation needs to be had, and it might not be burnout, but it might be something else. This might be one of those people in the team that is now really unhappy or unfulfilled and is starting to think about, do I leave, do I not leave, actually. So both from a well-being, a protection perspective, but also from a retention perspective. Like, I think, as a leader, or even as a colleague, as a peer, actually kind of keeping an eye out for some of these signs that something might not be quite right with someone. Because some people will be vocal, and they will share what's going on, but actually sometimes when they're not sharing it, like that's when often there is time to kind of maybe worry a bit more about it and focus on it and address it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, like you say, early warning signs and just being able to address it is a big thing. To name it, to name what you
Mm,
think's going on is a really good place to start with that, I think. I think from my own experience as well, like whenever I thought And certainly since running my own business, you always sort of seem to be like switched on a bit because it's just you in the business and
Yeah.
such. Is that a lesson that I've started to really learn is that when I have taken a step back and stopped, the
Yeah.
world didn't end, and actually something good happened on the other side of it. And I remember feeling that pressure when I was in house as well. So not just as when you felt like you were the single point of failure in a particular process, which can happen a lot in procurement, I
Yeah.
think. I think it's easy to adopt a mindset of, I can't, because then the whole process will fall down or something will
Mm,
go wrong, and then it will just create more problems for me when I get back. But I certainly think I've learned that lesson several times now, that when you do take a step back and
yeah.
at least, and if you are suffering from burnout, there are obviously it's a very personal journey, and different interventions work for different people. But that has been a huge lesson for me personally.
Mm,
Like something good always happens after I take a rest.
yeah. Yeah. So this is you going and booking some more holidays now, is it?
No, no,
That's
no,
it.
I'm
I'm just
done.
taking the
I'm
year
done.
off. There'll be good things the other side. Sounds
Yeah.
nice though.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really serious topic, isn't it? And this is
Yeah.
something that can really impact somebody's career and how they feel about their career, how they feel about the company where they work, how they feel, like you said
Yeah.
earlier, about being in procurement. It can really, when we are under that pressure and we're in a state of burnout, our minds can really sort of spiral with and that then leads to decisions, and sometimes rash
Mm,
decisions. And so going back to what we were saying earlier on, that thing, and we've done some great episodes on this around, like, creating the career that you want, or deciding
yeah.
what kind of leader that you want to show up to be. The cost of not doing that are some of these symptoms.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely, I think, we've obviously had a little bit of a giggle there, but I certainly think
Yeah.
it is a serious issue, and it's a very personal journey. And the first step is to really talk about it with someone.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think I would add as well, like and from personal experience, when you're in the thick of it, it is almost impossible to see your way out of
Mhm.
how you're feeling. But actually, so many people do, I don't know if bounce back is the right phrase, because actually it can take quite a lot to get yourself back. But actually, I know a lot of people, not just with burnout, with particularly challenging, difficult times, often what is the other side ends up being better.
Mhm.
And actually, I think, most people can't just, you have to stop and reset. If you've genuinely burnt out, like, you need to take time to reset and then start asking yourself some really important questions in order to avoid stepping back to that place again. And sometimes the magic is in those questions that you will only ever ask yourself because things have got really difficult and really challenging. And so, I've seen it a lot with people that have been made redundant as well. Like, at that moment in time, it's so difficult to see a way forward.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to believe that this thing that has happened to you and to your role, that actually it's going to be the making of you. And for so many people, like, actually, that thing that wasn't within their control, it leads them down this really different path that ends up being much more positive. So,
Mm.
it is incredibly difficult whilst people are going through this. So anyone listening right now, we know right now that it's going to be feeling really, really difficult. But I think you know, giving yourself some space to just try and think, and ask some of those really important questions. It's so important. And this is why I think when you're in that mindset, even thinking of the questions can be difficult. And this is where, you know, having an opportunity to get help and support, whatever that help and support looks like, actually, whether it is some kind of medical practitioner or counselor, or whoever it is, like, it might be a specific coach, it might be a friend, it might be your husband, it might be your wife, like, but I think just making sure that you are talking about it with someone that can help you to think, what are those questions?
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
it can be really
absolutely.
hard to think of them yourself when you're in this fog and this whir of all the questions. So it's like,
Mm.
so what is the question, the most important question next?
Yeah, it's the impartial sounding board, isn't it? Because you can't see it from inside, and
Yeah,
yeah, and we've talked about self-reflection and how important a practice it is. But yeah, I think when you're inside it, it's hard to be objective,
totally.
so yeah,
Yeah.
to take that space away and to think about how you could do that it is definitely a good first step.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone, as always, for tuning in. For those of you that aren't already aware, this week we're running a workshop that we're really excited about for procurement leaders, and it's really going to be helping procurement leaders with their growth in their careers. So we'll share some details about it so that you've got some more specifics. But if you're listening right now, live, as in it's this
Great.
Wednesday, yeah.
Mm.
So it's Wednesday, the 15th of July. So for anyone listening after we've released this episode, it will have been missed, unfortunately. But keep an eye out for any future ones that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining, everyone.
All right, thanks so much. Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.